right now is on recovering it.
Tonight, the PM doesn't say much about the Yukon UFO.
For the minister to review the case and come to the conclusion that there's a likelihood that there's been a miscarriage of justice in this case.
Plus, a new trial may be coming for a man convicted of a triple homicide.
Because I'm an ambassador and I represent the people across the country.
And Elder Billy Two Rivers passes into the spirit world. Good evening, Tansei Anin. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. We begin tonight in Labrador, where an inquiry into the treatment, experiences, and outcomes of Innu in the child protection system has finally begun after 6 years of delays. Angel Moore reports.
This is Elder Joachim Nui. His drumming opened the first day of the inquiry into Innu children in care. The goal is for the Innu Nation to find out what has been happening to their children once they go into youth protection. Elder Elizabeth Penishu expressed it in prayer.
For a long time, Innu have suffered.
The Innu say displaced youth in provincial care have lost their language and culture, and 3 youths have died by suicide. For years, the Innu Nation demanded answers, and 6 years ago, the province announced the inquiry, delayed to organizational challenges and the pandemic. Lead Commissioner, former Newfoundland and Labrador Justice James Igluyurte said,
"We understand that what we have to do today and until this inquiry is done must be the Innu way."
The Innu Nation, with over 3,000 people in Labrador, includes 2 committees, Sheheshe and Natwashish. Igluyurte said,
"The Innu themselves and the governments recognize that the care of children should belong to your community."
The other commissioners, Anastasia QP, former Grand Chief of the Innu Nation, and David Levine, a retired professor of social work, will hear testimonies and identify recommendations for change, as well as investigate the circumstances leading up to the deaths of the 3 youths. QP spoke in the Innu language.
We see that in our communities what my child protection system has done to us. We see it in our children.
This week, the hearings will focus on the history of the Innu and the acts of colonialism. With $4 million set aside by the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, the inquiry is expected to take 18 months to complete. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabuktuk, known as Halifax.
A Manitoba man convicted in a triple homicide more than 25 years ago may have a new trial. In 1997, Robert Sanderson was one of 3 Manitoba men convicted in the grisly slaying of 3 rival gang members. Today, Federal Justice Minister David Lametti announced via a press release, following an extensive review, he has referred the case of Mr. Robert Sanderson to the Manitoba Court of Appeal for a new appeal from conviction pursuant to the conviction review provisions of the Criminal Code. Ron Dalton is the Executive Director of Innocence Canada, a non-profit devoted to wrongful convictions in Canada, and he joins us now to talk about the case. Ron, hello and welcome to our show. What can you tell us about Robert Sanderson's case?
I can tell you that Mr. Sanderson has been convicted for the last 27 years of a triple murder, and he spent 25 of those years incarcerated inside of a penitentiary. He's been out on day parole for the last year and a half, but like everyone serving a life sentence, he continues to serve his sentence whether he's in the community or in the prison. A life sentence in this country is literally that. It lasts until the day you die.
Now, why did you apply for the ministerial review?
Well, Mr. Sanderson approached our organization, as many convicted people do, and asked us to have a look at his case. Unfortunately, we're a small nonprofit organization, so we often have a wait list before we can even get to someone's case. And we've been working on Rob's case for the last 10 years. We actually submitted an application to the federal justice minister in 2017. So that's 5.5 years ago, and it's taken that long for the minister to review the case and come to the conclusion that there's a likelihood that there's been a miscarriage of justice in this case. The minister hasn't determined that Mr. Sanderson is innocent or guilty and should go back to prison, but what he has done is taking the step of referring the case back to the Manitoba Court of Appeal and asking them to have a second, closer look at it.
Well, on that note, how does Minister Lametti's announcement today affect things going forward?
Well, from our perspective and from Mr. Sanderson's perspective, it's a positive development. The minister could have said, we reviewed the case and we don't think there's any merit to your claim of innocence, and Mr. Sanderson would be left with no further recourse. That could still happen at the Court of Appeal, but at least it's going to the Court of Appeal with the additional fresh evidence that we've provided to the minister and the minister's conclusion that there's a likelihood that there's been a miscarriage of justice. So it's a stronger case going back to the Court of Appeal than when they first looked at it 23 or 24 years ago.
And last one for you here, Ron. What's next? What's next?
What's next is just like any other appeal, our organization will file a factum or a statements of facts and legal jurisprudence to the Court of Appeal. The Crown will respond with their own factum and their own arguments. There'll likely be oral hearings in front of the Court of Appeal, and then the members of the Court of Appeal will take a few months likely to review the matter, write a decision, and hopefully within the next year, Mr. Sanderson will get a decision from them, and with any luck at all, it'll be a decision declaring him innocent.
Well, we'll certainly be watching. Ron, we appreciate the time and the insight into this.
Okay, well, thanks to you and your listeners. It helps to keep people informed about what's going on, because when it comes to the Winnipeg Police Services and Indigenous clients, we've had a number of cases like this, and I'm afraid we have some more in the pipeline.
Well, we want to hear what you think about the stories you've seen to start our show tonight. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca, or you can leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he's been in touch with First Nations in the Yukon after an unidentified high-altitude object was shot down over the territory this weekend. Trudeau says First Nations near the object's crash site have expressed safety concerns. Rescue teams are searching a large area between the Yukon communities of Dawson City and Mayo. 4 aerial objects have been shot down in recent days in Canada and the United States. Trudeau did not reveal more information about the object's origins, though he says officials are working to keep people safe. He also confirmed that there appears to be a pattern amongst the objects.
Our focus right now is on recovering it. Obviously, there is much analysis going on at the highest levels of NORAD in both Canada and the United States to try and understand more, to facilitate in the location of the object, and to understand better, and be able to answer the questions that Canadians have.
All right, it's time to step aside for a moment, but first, here's Lee Wilson with a look at what he is working on.
I'm Lee Wilson. I have the story of a 200-year-old headdress being returned close to home in northern BC.
Hereditary system is the head of the family. The title of Keowatachun, which is George Ahul was a Keowatachun, is passed down from generation to generation.
The headdress belonged to Chief George Ahul, whose family holds traditional land near Fort St. James. Direct descendants of George Ahul are pleased to have their cultural belongings repatriated from the Royal Ontario Museum.
It's a direct connection to my ancestors. The construction of it is through dentalium shells, noble women's hair. It's astounding to look at.
This story coming soon on APTN National News.
Welcome back to APTN National News. The 32nd annual March for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls is taking place tomorrow in Vancouver. Joining us is APTN's Tina House with a special guest who has been advocating on behalf of families for over a decade.
Thank you. We're here on the corner of Main and Hastings in the downtown east side of Vancouver, and in less than 24 hours from now, thousands of people are going to be marching these streets to demand justice for the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls and men and boys. Joining me today is Lorelei Williams. Lorelei, you've been an advocate now for 11 years. Tell me what it's been like in the front lines and marching with all those people demanding justice.
It's very hard. It's very emotional. Sometimes the emotions take over. At the same time, it's healing as well to be with all those families in one place. So there's definitely a lot of emotions, for sure.
Speaking of emotions, Lorelei, I know that since the last March, we've had so many more cases of murdered, missing Indigenous women and girls. Tell me about what you're up to on the 27th.
On February 27th, we're going to be having a rally for justice for Chelsea Portman, Tatiana Harrison, and Noel Ossoup's family. They've asked us to come together and have a call to action for police neglect in the cases of Tatiana Harrison, Chelsea Portman, and Noel Ossoup. So, you know, the families are frustrated. I work with so many families, and they usually come to me when they're frustrated with the police, when they feel like that nothing's being done. And so I support these families as much as I can. And when they ask me for certain things, I'll do whatever I can to help them and support them. So we'll be doing that right at the Gravely location where the investigators are, where we've had to meet with these families and the police officers.
Can we talk a little bit more about that? When you say police in action, so are they not investigating these files? Like, what's happening?
There are so many flaws. There are so many things that they're doing, that they're not doing to support these families. For example, when Chelsea went missing, there was such a simple thing to do that the family was asking for, was to look at the camera footage of where they thought she might have been last seen. I don't have the power. I wish I had the power, because then I would have looked at every space there, every place. But now they don't have that. So just simple things that they have the power to do, right? So there's a lot of, they have so many examples. They are always breaking their trust with the families. Something so simple that the families ask for, sometimes they just say, no, we're not gonna look into that. So the families' trust is lost with them, which hinders the case, which is horrible, because then when they don't trust the police, then who do they have to help them search for their loved ones? And they're in dangerous situations. They can be in very dangerous situations just searching for their loved ones. And I've been with them in many dangerous situations. And yeah, it's horrible.
Well, I thank you so much for all your work that you've done with the families over the years, and continued success for you and all that you do. Thank you so much. Back to you in studio.
A 2-year grant worth more than $6,000 is available for families in British Columbia with children affected by fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, or FASD. It is meant to provide support in a wide range of ways, including care, special events, or groceries. This week, families can apply for FASD funding relief through 2 distributors. In the Lower Mainland, the Asante Centre, and the rest of the province, Carrier-Sakani Family Services. There are 402 grants available. Families with children and youth up to the age of 19 are eligible. An official diagnosis is not required, and applications are open until early March.
Intended to support any aspect or respite or relief for families. So anything from needing a babysitter or care, or say a summer camp. For some family, this means extra groceries. Whatever respite means for your family, that's what this funding is for.
All right, we'll have more news when we come back, but first a look at this week's In Focus. Hello everyone, Valentine's Day is fast approaching, and we thought it would be a great time to do an In Focus based on love. And as always, we want you to join in on the talk next week. We want to see any photos or videos of things you love, like your partner, dogs, kids, or a favorite cultural activity that you love doing. You can send in what you love to infocus@aptn.ca, and you might just end up in our love-themed episode of In Focus. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. While out for a walk to stretch her legs, Gail French found herself at the Waterworks Conservation Park in St. Thomas, Ontario. Looks like a lovely place, and certainly stay off that ice. Maybe we can expect more of that sort of weather across the country. Now, before we get to the weather, we want to see some pictures of you and your sweetheart. So send some Valentine photos to share@aptn.ca as we hope to fill the rest of the week with pictures of true love. All right, now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather. We start on the East Coast, to 3 degrees in St. John's and 0 in snow in Charlottetown. Minus 18 in Kuujjuaq and minus 18 in Happy Valley Goose Bay. 1 degree in Quebec City and 3 in Montreal. Clear 9 in Toronto and 3 in North Bay. 6 degrees in Clear and Timmins and minus 23 in Big Trout Lake. Minus 28 in Churchill and minus 6 in Norway House. Minus 6 in snow in Barons River and plus 2 in Winnipeg. Minus 9 in Regina and minus 10 in Saskatoon. Minus 12 in snow in Buffalo Narrows and minus 24 in Stony Rapids. Moving west, minus 20 in snow in Fort Chipewyan and minus 9 in Peace River. Minus 4 in Edmonton and snow and minus 3 in Calgary. 7 degrees in Vancouver and minus 1 in Quesnel. 2 degrees in Prince Rupert and minus 7 in Dease Lake. Minus 18 in Beaver Creek and clear and minus 25 in Rock River. Minus 25 in Wrigley and minus 27 in Yellowknife. Minus 30 in snow in Inuvik and minus 32 in Colville Lake. Clear and minus 38 in Cambridge Bay and minus 31 in Whale Cove. Minus 41 in Igloolik, that is cold, and minus 19 in Iqaluit. Mohawk elder Billy Two Rivers has died. The 87-year-old passed into the spirit world this weekend in his home community in Kahnawake. Known as a wrestler, actor, and negotiator during the Oka crisis, Two Rivers lived a remarkable life. In 2019, he spent some time reminiscing with APTN's Tom Fenario. Here's that story.
Over here, this is one of the outfits that I wore when I was wrestling.
The name Billy Two Rivers is famous the world over, mainly for longtime wrestling fans who remember his 24 years in the ring.
So you never played a bad guy?
No.
Okay.
I didn't have a choice. They loved me.
Yeah.
No.
Two Rivers made his debut in 1953 after being trained by fellow Mohawk wrestler Don Eagle. He combined a fierce wrestling style with colorful regalia to travel the world. The United Kingdom, Japan, the United States all came out to cheer him on. Well, most of them. Right before a match in Hanover, Germany, a spectator criticized Two Rivers for wearing an inauthentic, pan-Indigenous outfit. Two Rivers went on to explain that even though he's Mohawk, he was proud to wear boots made by the Huron-Wendat and a headdress gifted to him by the Blood Tribe in Alberta.
He said, what is this? He says, you're not, he says, you're not Indian, what are you? I said, yeah, I'm Indian. I'm a native North American Indian. He says, well, what are you dressed like this for? I says, because I'm an ambassador and I represent the people across the country.
But being an ambassador wasn't enough to make him feel safe when it came to wrestling in places like Belfast during the late 60s.
At night, the soldiers would come out with darkened faces. They'd stand in a corner not to be seen, waiting for the rebels or something. And the greatest concern I had is that they're going to put a bomb underneath the ring or something, you know.
That wouldn't be the last time in his life Two Rivers would end up in a militarized zone.
Got a call about 5:30, almost 6 o'clock. And it was Joe, and he says, Billy, he says, the bridge is blocked. I said, what? He says, yeah, he says, the Mercer Bridge is blocked.
After ending his wrestling career in the mid-70s, Two Rivers became a council chief for the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake. He was among the leadership group charged with brokering peace after Kahnawake barricaded the Mercier Bridge in support of Kanesatake during the Oka crisis. And despite having traveled the world over, the summer of '90 was witness to the worst act of racism he ever saw, right next door to his own community in Montreal. In what's become known as the Roxit Whiskey Trench Incident, a convoy of Mohawk women, children, and elders leaving Kahnawake were stoned in their cars.
The fellows going around to the different businesses that were there and says, come on out and let's stop these Indians, these people. They didn't care.
After 20 years on council, Two Rivers retired in 1998. Since then, he's done acting in films and shows like Mohawk Girls, had a photo of himself used on the cover of a Van Morrison album, first without his permission before they settled out of court, and served as an elder for the Assembly of First Nations. But most of all, Two Rivers is proud of his 9 grandchildren, many of whom speak Kanien'kehá:ka, the Mohawk language, with him. It also appears that they have inherited his athleticism.
I just want to point out to you, I have a picture on there from a number of pictures where my granddaughter won her championship for Greater Montreal, I believe.
To say that Two Rivers has lived a rich life is to state the obvious.
I don't know how much longer I'll be in this world over here. I'm trying to pass everything that I know on to the next generation's job.
Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Kahnawake, Mohawk Territory.
Well, Super Bowl 57 is over with the Kansas City Chiefs beating the Philadelphia Eagles 38-35, much to my and many other Eagles fans' displeasure. But the game aside, this Super Bowl saw Indigenous people on and off the field making an impact. The design for Super Bowl 57 was done by an Indigenous artist. A land acknowledgement also took place for the first time at the big game, and the land acknowledgement was then followed up with a performance of America the Beautiful, blended with American and North American Indian Sign Language. The Tomahawk Chop and Name of the Chiefs was also a focal point of the game, with many calling for a name change and for fans to stop the chop. All of that, plus the performance of Patrick Mitsuing and other Indigenous dancers, showcased Indigenous people on one of the world's biggest stages. And we certainly hope they continue to showcase Indigenous culture moving forward. All right, that's all we have for you tonight on APTN National News. If you missed any of our stories tonight, or you want to catch up or learn more, you can head to aptnnews.ca. I'm Daryl Stranger. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.